Okay, as I said in class last time, this is a very important picture. We spent a lot of time talking about the things on this picture. I introduced to you somatics and autonomics last time, and we learned some of the key verbiage, some of the key terminology to use when talking about innervation. I started with some of the outline details of sympathetics and parasympathetics, and this will return later in the semester. So I want to just flip through that one more time today. And then this is where, as I said, this is where we'll spend the bulk of our time for the next few weeks, talking about the somatic nervous system, the innervation of skeletal muscle. But I started, if you remember, I started this by talking about the differences between single unit and multi-unit smooth muscle. And so you can see here that the blood vessels are innervated by autonomics. Now, I just going to point this out here because these are things that you will learn over the course of the semester, and you'll come back. If you're doing your work in anatomy properly, these things will resurface, and your memory will have them there, and you will ask questions about them, and after a while, they'll start to become part of your permanent memory. So you'll remember, he started with the blood vessels, but here's what you're going to learn. Even though I used it to introduce sympathetics and parasympathetics, the truth is, almost all of the smooth muscle in the blood vessel walls of your body is innervated.
Can I let them in, or?
Somebody help you up? Somebody help you up outside?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, but
Okay. So they needed you? Sorry? Your friend needed you?
yeah, not really.
So you made a conscious decision to choose your friend over me.
No.
How am I supposed to interpret that?
I thought I would be on time.
Well, you're not.
Sorry.
So the smooth muscle here in the blood vessels, we're going to discover as we move through anatomy. This will come later when we're tracking pathways again. I'm going to teach you blood vessel anatomy again, talk about artery and vein anatomy, blah, blah, blah. And you'll go, oh, I remember all that. And then you're going to learn that the majority of the innervation of blood vessels in your body is just from the sympathetic nervous system. The only exception to this rule is really in the reproductive system. So the vast majority of the control, the innervations of smooth muscles, is one division only. Now, from what you learned in class on Wednesday, how is that different from most autonomically controlled structures? How is that different? So if you looked at this picture, and you see all of these structures in the body that are innervated by the sympathetic nervous system, and you look at this picture and you see all of these structures that are innervated by the parasympathetic nervous system.
You mean the fact that it's just at its place, it's not right up the spinal cord or anything?
No,
Maybe the ganglia is close to the organ.
no, both of those are good ideas. Y'all are working at it. And I appreciate that. The reason that's different is because that is not expected. What you expect in the anatomy of any given autonomically controlled structure is that there will be sympathetic innervation there that does one thing, and parasympathetic innervation that does the opposite. So this is going to be an important physiology question later in your life. Really? So if I only have sympathetics here, then how do I control the size of blood vessels? This is blood pressure regulation and blood flow. In fact, you were introduced a little bit of this last time, right? When you're exercising, you need the blood in the muscles. When you're sitting still, you need the blood in the GI tract. How are you going to do all that redistributing of blood flow if the muscle in the walls of the vessel is only controlled by one division? And the answer is going to be, it's all about the receptors. So that is going to be like the thrust of nervous system stuff for us in physiology. It's all about the receptors. We have to talk about alpha adrenergic receptors and beta adrenergic receptors and how you stimulate them. It's okay. Obviously, we're all walking around, right? It's okay that the smooth muscle is innervated by sympathetics only. So I like to make a big deal about that because it will resurface. So just very briefly for review here, we saw in this picture that the cell bodies of the somatic nervous system send their projections, their axons, to skeletal muscles. These pathways are myelinated, and you know that that changes the appearance of the tissue. If it's myelinated, it looks like lighter coloration. It's white matter. If there's cell bodies there, we expect it to be a darker color. We call that gray matter in the nervous system. Now I return to this in just a second. But first, review this very briefly. The language of autonomics is the language of ganglia, singular, or ganglia, plural. So everything you say, everything I type on an exam, everything you read about autonomics and its anatomy is going to be about the ganglia. So this is the verbiage you must learn. Preganglionic neurons of the sympathetic nervous system are located in the spinal cord. In the gray matter or white matter areas? Gray. Good. So we'll identify that specific location later in the lateral horns. But you know the divisions, right? T1 to L2. And the preganglionic projections are short, comparatively speaking, and they're myelinated. So later, when we learn the details of the white Rami communicating branches and the gray Rami communicating branches coming off the spinal nerves, you'll go, I knew that because I learned early on that the preganglionic projections are myelinated. So what are they going to be, white or gray?
White.
White. Okay, the postganglionic cells then, the ganglion cells, also called the postganglionic neurons, at the ganglia, will then send their projections out to the targets. And typically in the sympathetic nervous system, these are long, comparatively speaking, because the ganglia are located close to the spinal cord. So short, long sympathetics. And we also see a dotted line here. This tells you that the postganglionic projection is in fact unmyelinated. White ramus or gray ramus? Gray ramus. Good. Now, the parasympathetic division uses cranial nerve 10 as its model. How many cranial nerves send parasympathetic information to targets? 4 of them, and they are 3,
5,
7,
11.
don't guess.
7, 11, 10.
No, shh, don't say that, you're confusing me. 3, oculomotor. 7, facial. 9, glossopharyngeal. 10, vagus. All right, so these are the 4. These are the big 4 for parasympathetics. The 4 cranial nerves that carry preganglionic information for parasympathetics. Yes, so the preganglionic neurons of the parasympathetic nervous system are in nuclei or ganglia.
Nuclei.
Good. Why did you say nuclei?
Because you said something about it last time, because it's different than what it's supposed to be typically.
Okay. That's too general. Okay. Why did I say nuclei?
You said it was like clusters of the cells that's called nuclei?
Okay. Right. So why don't you call it a ganglia then?
It's in the brain.
Good. So the cranial nerves are attached to the brain. So the clusters of nuclei that are sending the preganglionics are actually in the brain. So they're associated with nuclei in the brainstem. So these preganglionic neurons associated with nuclei in the brainstem are 4 cranial nerves, 3, 7, 9, and 10. They send, this is the vagus, y'all. This is the model parasympathetic. Let me show you why we do it this way. So draw a circle here. So there's cranial nerve 3, 7, and 9. Draw a circle around the structures here that are innervated by cranial nerves 3, 7, and 9. I can list those very quickly. Now draw a circle around all of the structures that are innervated by cranial nerve 10. You see the difference? When you say parasympathetics, you should immediately think vagus. This is the big one, and it's the model. Okay? So in this picture then, preganglionic neurons associated with the vagal nuclei, cranial nerve 10 send preganglionic projections that are myelinated, white, out to the ganglia. Where are these ganglia? They're close to the organs, yes. And then the postganglionic neurons, or the ganglion neurons, or the ganglion cells, or the postganglionic cell bodies, that's what these are, send their postganglionic projections a very short distance to the target. And they are not myelinated. Yeah. So the postganglionic projections in both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, as a general rule, are not myelinated. This is unusual in adults in terms of the total number of nerves. If you look at nerves, you expect them to be myelinated, but not so for sympathetics and parasympathetics. Okay, good. So just review here. T1 to L2, short projections to the ganglion, and then most of them are unmyelinated. Now you guys can see some other things here, can't you? What in the world is going on here? Now, all this up here fits our model quite nicely, but when we get down here and we start talking about splenic nerves, we've got a lot more to add to this, okay? Because some of the sympathetic ganglia are not actually in the chain. So I'm just showing you we've got a lot more to cover with this. You can see all these postganglionic projections fitting our model quite nicely. Do you see one that really stands out here? There's a solid green line to one of them.
The adrenal gland.
Isn't that interesting? Do you see it? So this is a special case. We have to talk about that one. Now, last piece here. I'll do this and do the last piece. So cranial nerves, this is the craniosacral division. This is the thoracolumbar division. So cranial nerves and sacral divisions to control parasympathetics. Ganglion at the target.
What are the different nerves called again? The
Sorry?
last one. What are the 4 different nerves again? Yes, sir, the 4. It's
Vagus.
Ocular, facial.
So you- Yes, you want to learn their names? Oh, that makes me so happy. Let's do that. So here's a section to show you the cranial nerves, right here, the 12 pairs, and you should learn them right now. They'll be on every test. Learn them right now. You know 4 of them by name already. I'm going to give you an acronym that will help you learn the other 8. There are 12 pairs of these cranial nerves that come off of the brain. Now, as we progress through the semester, you'll have to know exactly where they come off of the brain and exactly where they go. So here are their names in an acronym. On Old Olympus, towering top, a fat, vicious goat vandalized a hat. Now, you can Google acronyms for cranial nerves, and there are, I don't know, probably 30 of them available. And Trina's laughing because she knows that some of these are inappropriate. Yes? So if you want to be stupid and learn an inappropriate acronym for cranial nerves, that helps you, whatever. All I care about is you know their names at this point, their names and their numbers. So on this one, this is the one that I learned. This is the one that I suggest that you learn. On Old Olympus, towering top, a fat, vicious goat vandalized a hat. Here they are. On is the olfactory nerve. 1. Old is the optic nerve. 2. Olympus, cranial nerve 3. You know its name. Oculomotor. Now let's just pause for just a moment there. I wonder what the olfactory nerve is going to be involved with. Smell. I wonder what the optic nerve is going to be involved with. Sight. I wonder what the oculomotor nerve is going to be involved with. Oculo means eyes, or seeing. Motor means make it move. Yeah. So there's 6 extrinsic eye muscles, and 4 of them are controlled by this nerve. So we'll track those through the holes in the skull, which you already know. You've already learned the names of these holes, so we'll track them through there. On Old Olympus, towering, that's the trochlear. Top, that's the trigeminal. Trigeminal is a huge nerve. It has 3 big divisions, and we'll track all 3 of them. On Old Olympus towering, olfactory, help me. Optic, oculomotor, trochlear. Trigeminal, A is the abducens, cranial nerve 6. F, fat, is the 7th cranial nerve, and you knew this one already. This is the facial nerve. I wonder where that goes. Okay, so that was going to show up right off the bat as we start test 2, Monday a week from now, because we're going to learn the attachments of the muscles of expression on our faces, and they're all controlled by this nerve, the facial nerve. Interestingly enough, the other set of muscles that we're going to learn on our face are the muscles of mastication, the chewing muscles, and they are, as a general rule, controlled by the 3rd branch of this nerve, the trigeminal nerve. So, and we'll track that. Just trying to get you interested. So, abducens, facial, vicious. The 8th cranial nerve, vicious. V stands for vestibulocochlear. Now, most of you probably are not aware of the importance of that name, but you will, by the time you get through it, know why it's called that. The vestibule in your inner ear is the organ of balance. The vestibule is the organ of static equilibrium. It's what tells you how to be in a balanced position. Cochlea is the inner ear portion that is for hearing. The organs of hearing are there. So the vestibulocochlear nerve is going to be involved in balance and hearing. Wonder why people with inner ear problems have balance issues. The vestibulocochlear nerve, cranial nerve 8, 7, 8, 9 is the glossopharyngeal. Y'all knew this already, yes? Why did you know glossopharyngeal? It's one of the 4 in parasympathetics, right? Now, every name, we're going to do this over and over again. So, glossus in the human anatomy, the glossus is this organ. The tongue is the glossus. The pharynx is the area behind your tongue. The pharynx is the opening behind your tongue where air has to go through and everything that you swallow has to go through. The pharynx. So what is this nerve involved with? The glossopharyngeal. The tongue and swallowing, yeah, right. So the glossopharyngeal cranial nerve 9 is involved in these structures in the back of the mouth. 10, vandalized. That is the vagus, cranial nerve 10. It is the model for parasympathetics. A is the accessory nerve, and H is the hypoglossal. So learn their names right now and never forget them. On Old Olympus towering, top of back, vicious scope, vandalized a half. Now, are you getting sick of it yet? So we've talked about generalities, general phenomena that will help us as we're going through the skull and help us as we're talking about structures innervated as we go through anatomy. We've talked about autonomics. I will do all of that again, and I will add a gory amount of detail to that when we get there. But for test 2, we're going to need to talk about this, the innervation of skeletal muscles. So I taught you in skin a general pathway for sensation. We took a Pacinian corpuscle and we took that information to the brain. Now I want to go the other way, because this is where we're going to spend most of our time. Now the pathway from the Pacinian corpuscle to the brain, we named spinothalamic. And that name should make sense. That is a sensory pathway. So in the nervous system, when we say sensory, we mean going toward the spinal cord or brain. Now, the pathways, the bulk of the pathways that we're going to learn, even though I'm going to show you the body's dermatomes, I'm not going to make you memorize them, because if you learn the motor pathways, you know the sensory pathways. It's the same nerves. So the somatic nervous system goes out to the muscles. And we're going to identify, there are fewer numbers of these, and they're really less complicated than the sensory parsings. The somatic nervous system pathway that I'm going to teach you today is the big one. It is the big daddy nerve. It is the huge bundle of information going out to skeletal muscles. It is called the pyramidal tracts. The pyramidal tracts. Now notice I didn't use the word nerve there. This is going to be also a piece of nervous system anatomy that I'll have to use over and over again. If I say the word tract, you should think a bundle of axons, a wired bundle of axons, myelinated, this tract myelinated in the brain or spinal cord. If I say the word nerve, you should think exactly the same thing. But this time, simply changing the term from tract to nerve means that I am outside the brain or spinal cord. Okay, so this first one, the big one, is the pyramidal tract system. Now, where have I heard that word before? In the cerebral cortex, right? Pyramidal neurons. Now, it's going to have another name. You'll need to remember both of them. They're the major motor output. Sensory coming to the brain or spinal cord, motor going away from. This is a motor pathway. When I said motor a minute ago, you said muscle contraction, and you're right. But technically it means information leaving the central nervous system. This is motor information. And we talk about motor pathways. If we look at neurons in the ventral horn, I call them, that beautiful picture we looked at, I call that a lower motor neuron, an LMN, in the ventral horn of the spinal cord. So this pathway will be called pyramidal tracts. It will also be called corticospinal. Now, cortico is a prefix you haven't heard from me yet, and refers to the cerebral cortex. Where are the pyramidal neurons? In the cerebral cortex. Yes, so cortico, and where's it going? To the spinal cord, the corticospinal tracts. All right, so this is where they start. This is interesting. Now, before we're done with the semester, you'll have to know all of these, but today, just the first one. There is an area on the human brain right about where your coronal suture is. You see why learning the skeleton is important? Right about where your coronal suture is, it separates the frontal from the parietal bones. There is a hill in the nervous system. We call these gyri or gyrus, G-Y-R-U-S, a little hill. The brain's got all these little hills and valleys. And all the little hills we call gyri, or singular gyrus. And all the little valleys we call sulci, or sulcus. And so you can see this little hill right here, right about where the coronal suture is, just in front of a valley that's very easily identified, called the central sulcus. That little hill right there is called the primary motor area. It is also known as the precentral gyrus. The precentral gyrus. And it is cortex on the edges, which means it is gray matter, which means it is dominated by pyramidal neurons. If you section through the precentral gyrus, in fact, that's what I showed you in the histosection. A section of precentral gyrus. All those pyramidal neurons all over that tissue. So the precentral gyrus, just in front of the central sulcus, contains a map of the human body, a motor map. There's an image here of the actual human body. Can you see it? So this is a coronal section. You see why you had to learn sections now? How is this section taken? Show me with your hands. How did I cut this? Now it's just half, right? So there should be another picture just like it over here. How? Right. So this way, the section taken this way, a coronal section taken through the precentral gyrus. And now I'm looking at it, and can you see toes and legs and wrists and hands and face? This is what we call in anatomy the motor homunculus. The word homunculus means little man. This is the little man on the human brain. Every neurosurgeon has a ball with this with their residents. The first time they cut a skull off to do something on a brain surgery with a patient, I know I saw Dr. Droop do it many years ago. He let me watch. There are no pain receptors on the surface of the brain, so a local will do it. They just make them, they just drug them up a little with a local, and then they cut the skull, so they deaden that part so they can't feel the pain on their skull, and they remove the skull cap, and then they wake them up. So there your patient is on the table, awake, the brain exposed. So then the doctor takes a probe and touches various portions of the precentral gyrus, and the patient goes, or, depending on where you touch it. And so you learn just the gist of this map right here. You can predict exactly what's going to happen. So if you touch it on the right, you touch it on the left side, you get stuff over here. You touch it on the right side, you get stuff over here. Now you know the answer to that question already. Why is that? Where does it cross? Yeah, fundamental anatomy things. I'll bring them all up in the first test. Fundamental anatomy things. This is another reason why we call them pyramidal tracts, right? Because on the anterior side of the brainstem, 85% of these pyramidal tracts, these axons, cross to the other side. And it makes little hills, little pyramids on the surface of the medulla. We call them the pyramids of the medulla oblongata, where the fibers cross. And the anatomy word for that is they decussate. So here's the fancy way of saying it. The decussation of the pyramids of the medulla oblongata. All terminology that should start now to become familiar to you. This is the precentral gyrus. These are the motor neurons that send information to the muscles. So these are where they are. You touch them, person moves. Now, the axons from these guys come through the brain and make their way down to the spinal cord. Now, this is very intriguing to me. In this original picture, it shows one axon all the way out here to the muscle. And that is actually not right, but it's not far off. Because in an actual situation where you would, let's say you want to make one of the peroneal muscles contract to make the leg move. So that's going to start right here in the spinal cord. So if I'm on Miss Frizzle's bus and I get on board the neuron here of the precentral gyrus, and I want to control the leg, the crural muscle in the leg, I get on board the axon and I'm driving over the myelin sheaths all the way down. I go through the brain, I get into the spinal cord, and I will go down the spinal cord all the way down to the lower portions of the cord, into the areas of the cord that we call the lumbar and sacral plexus. This is one cell, y'all. One neuron. You could ride from the brain, from here, all the way to here. So that is a long axon, and that picture illustrates that, and so in that sense it's good. It's a good picture. Now, there's a synapse made here. Okay, first, in the spinal cord, where is that information? So tell me, first, you know this part, where would be some pain, where would be some touch, some crude touch information from a Pacinian corpuscle in my spinal cord? Yeah, now later we're going to see some more over here, but I didn't want to confuse you in the first test period. So here, right, in the anterior funiculus, in this white portion here, not in the horns, but in the funiculi on the anterior side, sensory. All right, now, all of the motor stuff coming out of the precentral gyrus. That's true. All the motor stuff coming out of the precentral gyrus is found over here, in this lateral funiculus. So there's a huge bundle of wires here on both sides, a huge bundle of wires in these lateral funiculi that are carrying motor information. If you've got damage in the spinal cord on the lateral portions of the cord, you probably have a motor deficit somewhere. Now, if you were told exactly what portion of the spinal cord that lesion was in, the lateral funiculus, then you could predict specific muscles. So that's really our job in test 2, to be able to predict the specific muscles. In order to do that, you're going to have to know where in the spinal cord the nerves are connected that go to individual muscles. This is why you have to learn the innervations. So let me ask you this. When the information comes out of the lateral funiculus and it's time for it to go to the muscle, it makes one synapse normally with a neuron in the gray matter of the cord. Where is that neuron? I'm going to the muscle. The axon is going to come out of the lateral funiculus and make one synapse in the gray matter of the cord. Where is that neuron going to be? Yeah. Y'all starting to put this together? Put the pieces together, y'all. When we looked at the section of spinal cord in the histo section, I showed you a lower motor neuron. Where are they? They're all here in the anterior horn of the spinal cord. One synapse. Now from that lower motor neuron, if I jump the synapse over to the lower motor neuron, now I can ride that axon all the way out to the muscle. So where would it go? Would it go out the ventral side of the cord, or would it go out the dorsal side of the cord? It goes out the ventral side. So this is a hard and fast rule, and you've learned it now. The spinal or dorsal root ganglia carry what kind of information into the dorsal horn? Sensory only. This is all sensory. What kind of information comes out of the ventral horn? This is all somatic motor information, right? Now, that is not 100% correct, because in the T1 to L2 divisions, we've got some sympathetics to talk about. But the vast majority of these bundles of axons coming out the ventral root here in the spinal nerve are somatic motor neurons. And as they come out of the spinal cord, they are going to form what we're going to call spinal nerves. And these spinal nerves are going to go to the individual muscles. Now, here's where it starts to get really ugly in anatomy. As the spinal nerves come off, they don't just go to the muscle normally. Instead, they join axons from other spinal divisions going to that muscle. This is the incredible complexity, I would argue the incredible design of the control of the skeletal muscle system in the human body. If you look at a spinal cord, you can clearly see in anybody's spinal cord there is a bulge in the cervical area and a bulge in the lumbar area. There is more mass in your spinal cord right through here and right through here. And the reason seems quite obvious to me. All of the information that's going to control all of the upper extremities, head, arms, is going to come off of this enlargement on the top of the cord. And all the information that's going to control all of the movement, my legs and everything down here, is going to come off the lumbar enlargement. It needs more room. There are more cells there. There's more pathway stuff going on there. Now, the real complication is when that information, when that lower motor neuron sends his axon out, he is going to join normally